$4 billion of U.S. warships are now sitting off Venezuela's coast. At least 3 Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, each armed with 96 vertical launch cells, are pointed south. A Ticonderoga-class cruiser, loaded with long-range Tomahawks worth nearly $2 million each, sails beside them. Below the surface, a Virginia-class attack submarine, cost $3.5 billion, moves silently, capable of firing torpedoes or striking Caracas with cruise missiles in under 10 minutes. Overhead, P-8A Poseidon patrol planes, valued at $220 million each, drop sonar buoys and scan the Caribbean for targets. On deck, more than 4,000 sailors and Marines are preparing for missions that cost Washington over $25 million per day just to sustain. Officially, this is a campaign against drug cartels. In reality, the scale looks like preparations for war. The numbers tell the story. Venezuela's defense budget barely touches $2 billion a year, compared to the United States' $877 billion. Its navy is a relic force, a handful of corvettes and patrol ships from the 1970s, no match for a single American destroyer. Its Air Force flies aging F-16A/B jets acquired in the 1980s, while across the water, the U.S. prepares stealth F-35s that cost $80 million each and burn $36,000 per flight hour. The U.S. calls this counter-narcotics, yet every missile loaded, every ship deployed, every jet flown, screams of a larger mission, pressure on Nicolas Maduro's regime. And this deployment is not just about Venezuela. Chinese analysts warn that the U.S. could use this region to test strategies for intercepting hypersonic missiles like China's DF-17, which flies at Mach 5. Russia has already supplied Maduro with S-300 air defense batteries, each worth $150 million and capable of threatening U.S. aircraft within 200 kilometers. This is the opening act of a confrontation where the math of war is staggering. Billion-dollar ships versus collapsing oil revenues, stealth fighters versus outdated radars, Tomahawks versus Russian-made interceptors. The Caribbean is no longer quiet water. It is a launch pad. On September 2, 2025, the first shot was fired. A Venezuelan smuggling boat, moving at nearly 40 knots through international waters, suddenly became the center of global attention. The U.S. military identified it as linked to the Trinidad cartel, accused of trafficking narcotics and weapons. Within minutes, the order came down. An American surveillance drone locked on target. The weapon used remains classified, but experts suggest either an AGM-114 Hellfire missile, cost $150,000 per round, or an AGM-65 Maverick, closer to $250,000. One missile was enough. The boat erupted in flames, breaking apart on impact. 11 men on board were killed instantly. The strike lasted seconds, but the bill did not. Factoring in the drone's operating costs, an MQ-9 Reaper burns $4,000 per flight hour, with an average mission lasting 15 to 20 hours. The price of this operation easily crossed $250,000. Add naval escorts, satellite support, and personnel overhead, and the true cost approaches $1 million for a single destroyed vessel. The Pentagon hailed it as a victory against narcotics, but the images, charred remains of a speedboat in the Caribbean, went viral, sparking a wave of questions. Who authorized a lethal strike on suspected smugglers? Where was the due process? And why was U.S. firepower unleashed so close to Venezuelan waters? In Caracas, President Nicolas Maduro wasted no time. He denounced the attack as piracy and aggression, claiming it violated sovereignty and international law. Venezuelan state media labeled it an act of war, demanding retribution. Defense Minister Vladimir Padrino Lopez vowed to meet fire with fire if another strike occurred. Internationally, the debate exploded. Legal scholars called it a potential extrajudicial killing, pointing out that drug smuggling, while criminal, does not justify military execution under international law. Critics inside the U.S. compared the operation to a targeted assassination, while allies like Colombia and Brazil stayed cautious, unwilling to be dragged into the crossfire. In Washington, however, the tone was defiant. Vice President J.D. Vance brushed aside questions, declaring, "These people were terrorists. I don't care what international lawyers think." Secretary of State Marco Rubio defended the action as a necessary strike against narco-terrorism, while President Trump doubled down, saying more operations were on the table. The fallout went beyond words. Within days, U.S. intelligence reports suggested Venezuela had ordered its Air Force to place F-16 fighters on high alert at bases near the Caribbean coast. Militias were called up in key states. Across Venezuela, state television broadcast drills of civilian reservists carrying rifles, with Maduro vowing to mobilize millions if needed. What began as a single missile strike had lit the fuse. The question now was how far Washington was willing to go, and how far Caracas could push back before the next shot escalated into something far bigger. The September 2nd strike was only the beginning. By the end of that week, Washington escalated. 10 F-35A Lightning II stealth fighters, each priced at $80 million, were flown to Muniz Air National Guard Base in Puerto Rico. It was the first time in history that stealth jets had been stationed this close to Venezuela. Their mission was clear: deterrence, and, if ordered, precision strikes. Operating costs soared immediately. An F-35 requires nearly $36,000 per flight hour, and with continuous patrols and readiness drills, the deployment drained hundreds of millions in just days. The jets carried a mix of AIM-120 AMRAAM air-to-air missiles at $1.1 million each, and GBU-31 JDAM precision bombs, each about $40,000. The Pentagon was preparing for something far larger than chasing smugglers. At the same time, whispers surfaced of new strike options on the table: drone operations inside Venezuelan territory. The workhorse for such missions, the MQ-9 Reaper, costs $32 million per unit and can carry 4 Hellfire missiles and 2 laser-guided bombs. Leaked reports suggested potential targets included cartel bases, airfields, and even radar sites protecting Maduro's coast. Caracas answered with mass mobilization. State TV showed columns of armed reservists in Caracas, Valencia, and Maracaibo. Officials boasted of 4 million militia members on call, though most were poorly armed and trained. The regular Venezuelan armed forces, around 120,000 active personnel, were placed on alert. Coastal defenses were reinforced with Russian-supplied S-300 air defense batteries, each worth $150 million and capable of tracking American aircraft up to 200 kilometers away. But the most provocative response came in the skies. Venezuelan F-16AB fighters, originally purchased in the 1980s, took off from Base Aérea Libertador and made a low-altitude pass near the American destroyer USS Thomas Hudner. Flying barely 1,000 meters above the sea, the jets cut across the destroyer's radar perimeter before banking away. The Pentagon labeled it a highly provocative maneuver. For Venezuela, it was a warning shot, proof that even aging fighters could rattle a U.S. warship. Inside Washington, the tone hardened. The White House briefed Congress on expanded rules of engagement. Military planners calculated strike costs. A single night of F-35 sorties, supported by aerial refueling tankers and AWACS surveillance, would consume $200 to $250 million. A week-long air campaign could top $2 billion, rivaling Venezuela's entire annual defense budget. Regional reactions added pressure. Colombia, Washington's closest ally, quietly reinforced its border with Venezuela. Brazil's government urged restraint, warning that the standoff risked destabilizing South America's economy. Meanwhile, Moscow condemned U.S. aggression and hinted at expanding military technical support to Caracas, potentially upgrading Venezuela's air defense with BUCM-2 systems or resupplying spare parts for the F-16 fleet. The Caribbean sky now held a dangerous mix: stealth F-35s flying invisible patrols, Venezuelan F-16s testing American destroyers, and radar operators on both sides with fingers on the trigger. The escalation had moved beyond cartels. Both militaries were now staring each other down, one misstep away from the first clash between U.S. stealth and Russian-built defenses on Latin American soil. The standoff has reached its breaking point. On one side, the United States, a superpower with $877 billion in annual defense spending, stealth jets, billion-dollar destroyers, and submarines that can erase a city in minutes. On the other side, Venezuela, a nation under sanctions, clinging to $2 billion in defense funds per year, but armed with Russian systems and millions of mobilized fighters vowing to defend their homeland. If Washington decides to strike, the options are clear. A destroyer's Tomahawk cruise missile, range 1,600 kilometers, cost $1.9 million each, could obliterate Venezuelan radar sites, command bunkers, or air bases before a single pilot even takes off. A coordinated strike package of F-35s launching JDAMs and AMRAAMs could neutralize Maduro's F-16 on the ground in a matter of hours. Military planners estimate the first 24 hours of combat would cost over $500 million, not counting the long tail of logistics and sustainment. But Venezuela is not defenseless. Its S-300 air defense batteries positioned near Caracas and coastal bases are designed to track stealth aircraft and intercept cruise missiles. Each launcher holds 4 missiles, with reloads supplied from Russia. In a best-case scenario, they could down an F-35 or even intercept incoming Tomahawks, a propaganda victory Maduro would parade worldwide. Even so, each missile fired costs over $1 million, a devastating expense for an economy already in freefall. The human factor is equally volatile. Venezuela's 120,000 regular troops are backed by claims of millions of militia members, poorly trained but fiercely nationalistic. A U.S. strike could ignite nationwide insurgency, with militias ambushing convoys and threatening U.S. allies like Colombia. Regional analysts warn of a conflict that could spill across borders, choking oil trade routes and sending shockwaves through global markets. In Washington, hawks argue that a decisive strike now could break cartel networks and topple Maduro. Doves warn that it could drag America into another endless war, one where every Tomahawk missile costs more than a Venezuelan family earns in a lifetime. The Caribbean night is tense. American destroyers float with launch tubes armed. Venezuelan radars sweep the skies, searching for ghosts. Stealth jets sit on the runway in Puerto Rico, pilots ready. The world waits for a single spark. If the next missile is launched, this will no longer be about cartels. It will be about sovereignty, survival, and whether a war in Venezuela becomes the first great flashpoint of a new global confrontation. Billions in stealth jets and destroyers, all pointed at a country flying 1980s F-16. This isn't a fight. It's an F-35 at a knife fight. But even rusty knives can cut, and one mistake could light the Caribbean on fire. Billions of dollars in stealth jets and destroyers, all circling a country whose defense budget wouldn't even buy a single U.S. submarine. One Tomahawk costs more than a Venezuelan family earns in 10 years, and Washington just parked 100 of them off Maduro's front yard. This isn't a fair fight. It's like bringing an F-35 to a knife fight, except the other guy's knife is rusty, and he borrowed it from the 1980s. But here's the danger. Even a rusty blade can draw blood if the superpower slips. The Caribbean is now a powder keg, and one wrong move could turn drug wars into a regional war nobody planned for. So buckle up, hit that subscribe button, because if the next chapter kicks off, you're going to want front row seats to the most expensive showdown ever staged in America's backyard.